My name is Derek De La Quadri, and I am the Marketing Director for Vision InfoSoft. Today's webinar is titled Estimating and Bidding Do's and Don'ts. We'll be sharing some of our estimating best practices and shed some light on common bad habits and pitfalls. By the way, with this webinar, we broke a new record. Nearly 400 people have registered. From my memory, I think 110 or so was our highest in the past. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to introduce our webinar presenter today, Brian Hoffelder. He's been our estimating and training consultant as well as our software development manager since 1993. Before I hand it over to Brian, I'd like to explain how you can interact with us during this webinar. Because there's so many people, the best way to interact with us is through the questions module, which you'll find on the right-hand side of your screen in the GoToWebinar tool that should be either open on the right or maybe you minimized it. You can type your questions there throughout the webinar, and I'll do my best. That's kind of my job in this webinar while Brian presents you is the presenter. I'll be answering your questions and bringing your questions up to Brian as much as I can during the webinar and at the end of the webinar. We won't be able to get to them all, but we'll do our best, and then we'll have someone follow up with you either on the phone or email afterwards if the question seems like you're kind of waiting on an answer. You can always call us after the webinar or email as well if you want to follow up with a question. So we'd like to start off here after you've enjoyed our Dilbert cartoon by bringing a poll up, kind of to get started, just to see if you're awake and kind of get a feel for our audience. So what is the most common tactic you use to win a job? So the idea here is choose the answer that you find maybe you use more often than others to give yourself an advantage in winning a job. It could be a particular job. It could be a span of time of jobs, just something you do the most often. And I'll wait a few seconds here while some of you answer. Looks like we have a pretty clear winner, if you will. I can see as the votes come in, I can see the percentages. All right, just a couple more seconds. Looks like about 62% of you have voted so far. Excellent, that's good. All right. Which one do you think it's going to be, Brian?
Well, I'm actually looking at the results too, so that would be cheating.
That would be cheating.
I probably would have guessed that, though.
Okay. All right. We're at 75% of you have voted. Oh, they're still jumping in. All right. Awesome. All right. I'm going to give it 2 more seconds here, and I'm going to close the poll. We got 80% of you voted, and I'm going to close it. And let's share it here. So lower your markup was the highest. Have any comments on that, Brian, or you want to discuss that later?
Yeah, actually, we'll probably discuss that a little bit during the webinar here today, some of the options and things that are the do's and don'ts of getting bids. So, yeah, that'll come up a little bit during the webinar.
All right. Well, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to you now, Brian. It's all yours.
Thanks, Derek. I was looking at the list of attendees that comes up on our end on this webinar software, and I saw a lot of familiar names. So actually, it's good for you all to know that a lot of you are actually directly or indirectly contributors to this webinar, because this webinar is really based on all of the feedback and input I've gotten over the years with training people and doing consulting, as well as working in the industry myself, but mostly based on the input and things that people have told me over the years. And I kind of have a unique position in that, not only the number of people I've trained over the years, which is literally thousands of estimators, but my position as a consultant and a trainer is a kind of a neutral position. So I think people tell me lots of things that they wouldn't tell tell other people, certainly their competitors. And I've learned obviously to take a lot of the stories and feedback with a grain of salt, but you do hear a lot of things that make sense and that are I think you can draw some conclusions from when you hear them enough times over the years. So we're starting out with what I call the bidding don'ts, and you'll notice we titled this seminar "Estimating and Bidding," and they're kind of different topics in my mind, or they have a little bit of differentiation. In my mind, bidding estimating is just the manual process of putting together an estimate, the counting, the measuring, the pricing, the whole process of coming up with a number, your cost of material and labor. Bidding gets into a little more of strategy. So we're going to talk about both today because they obviously overlap each other and are both important here. So bidding, again, is a little more of the strategy, and the estimating is a little more of the mechanical process. I run across this first don't very often with that mindset that you got to bid everything. I don't know how many times I've been in a contractor's office or sitting beside somebody and they get a call and they got somebody who wants them to bid a job. I also do a little bit of freelance estimating, so I get calls from people that want to bid something because they've got 4 or 5 bids to do and they can only get to 1 or 2 of them. So bidding everything is a mentality that I think we have in this business because you guys work hard, you're aggressive, you're trying to build a business, and sometimes you fall into the mindset that you want to just bid everything that comes into your door, and that's obviously something you want to be careful to avoid. You can't bid everything, you don't want to bid everything. The next one you might not agree with, and again, all these topics are things that certainly are not black and white types of opinions. There's room for disagreement and varying shades of gray on these topics, but I honestly feel that it's not a good idea to bid when there's more than 5 competitors, especially when you get up to 8, 9, 10 competitors. The chances of you winning a job are so low that the person who gets the job is either taking the job because they want to keep some people busy. We'll talk about that in a minute. They're taking the job because they made a mistake. That often happens. When you have 10 bidders, there's a good chance that somebody made a mistake or they just don't know what they're doing. Maybe they're bidding work they're not familiar with, and the odds are just too bad when you're bidding jobs with too many competitors. Sometimes you can't turn them down. You have to do a bid for a good customer, but if at all possible, I think when the odds are not in your favor when you get up to more than 5 competitors. I've done a lot of analysis of this actually over the years with bids I've done and other customers have done. It just the chances of success go way down when you get too many bidders. Along those lines is bidding to companies who won't give you results. I think it's very important to get feedback on your bids, and you need to know where you stand. A lot of the time when you call back or to get the bid results, and if they're not giving you, not returning your calls or not giving you the results, that's a good indication that you're getting the runaround. Either they're possibly shopping your bid, or they're just using your number to help them get a job and don't have any intention of actually giving you the contract. Bidding too aggressively when there are lots of jobs to bid is a topic that actually comes up at this time of year, maybe a little more than others. In a lot of places in the country, this is a busy time of the year to bid. In the springtime and beginning before summer, there's a lot of jobs typically to bid because of the weather. Obviously in the winter, a lot of the parts of the country is not conducive to bidding. So you might be actually in the middle or getting towards the end of your busy bidding season. And what I see in a lot of areas in the country, especially when the bids start to really get a lot of jobs that are available to bid, is that people are too aggressive. Maybe they've been slow over the winter, and now they really want to get some work in there to get things going again. And sometimes there's a temptation to bid too aggressively. Sometimes you got to sit back a little bit. One of the things you don't want to happen is you get in there and win a lot of jobs at very low margins, and then you turn around the following week or the following month and you've got more jobs to bid, but you don't have the manpower to maybe even do the estimate, let alone staff the job. So you don't want to overcommit yourself too. And I know it's tempting. Again, it's part of that mentality that the electrical contractors have of just wanting to do everything and for everybody in every situation. Let me just take a quick look at my just a second here. Derek, have we had any other questions or input that I should pause on right now? Anything you want to
What are you doing?
throw at me that you've seen?
Are you checking your calendar here? What's going on?
I'm sorry, I was trying to check the web software.
Did you double book us? No, not right now. I've
Okay.
pretty much been able to handle everything. One of our viewers mentioned that he teaches estimating classes, and that he uses a type of bid evaluator that he created, like a Excel spreadsheet type thing. And
Okay.
it's actually his name is Jim Duff, and I think he actually created a blog post on our website that discusses this, and I think we made that bid evaluator document available on our website, and I'll have to find the link to that so we can share that in an email follow-up.
And I think that anything you can do to make this whole process of selecting bids and your strategy for the bids a little more objective rather than subjective is a good idea. I think a lot of us are guilty of just going on gut feel, seat of the pants when it comes to deciding if we're going to bid a job and how much to mark up a job and what jobs to bid and that kind of thing. So those kinds of processes are very, very helpful. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide here. We're still in the don'ts. This kind of relates a little bit to our poll we did at the beginning of what things people do sometimes to get a job that you may be forced to do, but if at all possible, you don't want to do. Now, this first one I've heard a lot of times over the years. I've heard people tell me, based on the number of hours in their estimate, that the only thing they can do to get the job is to lower their hours. Well, it's obvious that money's coming directly out of your company's pocket. I don't think it usually makes sense to just lower your number of hours on an estimate because that's where you need to be to get a job. If the job is being bid at too low a price, then the best thing to do, and sometimes the hardest thing to do, is just to walk away. Same thing with lowering your price to keep people busy. Maybe some of you have heard this story from me before, but my dad was an electrical contractor many years, just recently retired, and and I remember being around in situations where, well, we really need to get some work here to keep some people busy. And that's certainly a viable attitude, but it sometimes is going to be the thing that really hurts you the most. Sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and either lay off some people or tell them to stay home for a while. Just lowering your price to keep everybody busy is not necessarily in your long-term interest. Yeah, we've probably just been through one of the longest and deepest recessions in the construction economy in the history of the country, all the way back to the Depression practically. Certainly we've all seen a lot of that, and we've all been through, trying to keep people busy. And ultimately, what was the point? If we had to cut back, we had to cut back, and it's often better to do it earlier rather than later. Tough thing to do.
Hey, Brian.
Something a little more related to our business, which is, yeah, Derek.
Brian, before we, I had a couple questions about the previous slide, actually, that came in after you started this slide. I don't know if you want to finish that last point up there on pricing, or?
No, go ahead. I'll come back to that.
All right. Well, one question is more for, I guess, our development if we don't have these, which I don't believe we have, but do we have templates available for tracking feedback from customers? So I'm guessing he means, what you mean. I'm guessing he means like bid feedback.
I guess I'm still not sure what you mean. You mean
well to help them track why they didn't win the bid or why they did win the bid is what I'm guessing.
Okay, so just keeping track of the bid results. Actually, we've got something in the next version of the software where you'll be able to add to your bid log the results of the bids and that kind of thing, so it'll be a little more analytical. We haven't gone into that a whole lot. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for people to analyze their bid results. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute.
Okay, what kind of results info should we expect the company to provide as a different person?
Well, basically just the number. You know, what was the low bid, and what were the prices of the other bidders? At least you need the low bid. You need to know if you were bidding $100,000 and somebody was down at $75,000 or somebody was at $99,000. That makes a big difference in your attitude as far as whether you're going to bid to that company again. So, and it's nice to see the whole actual list of bidders and what their prices were. And most companies should be pretty open about providing that. And again, if they're not, it's kind of a clue that maybe something's going on that you don't want to see.
Okay, and one more here. Jim Duff from earlier mentions the best method for feedback for that he finds is through his vendors. Lighting reps are a key here when GCs will not help.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes the general contractors aren't good at giving back results, but your suppliers, especially the lighting reps and people in the industry, will know who got the job and maybe even where around the prices were. So there are other places to get feedback.
All right, we're back to
pricing. At least
pricing.
again, it can be okay. So this one I was mentioning is a little bit more related to our part of the business, which is the pricing of the materials. A lot of the time, contractors will get call suppliers and get pricing on the commodities like conduit and wire for a particular bid. That can be a little bit risky because obviously commodities have a lot of volatility. I think it's a good idea to have a little bit of cushion on your commodities. And typically, if you look at our target price in Epic, the target price on the wire and the conduit has a little bit of cushion built in, usually in the neighborhood of 5 to 10%. So even though you might be able to call and get a better price today on those items, not necessarily something you want to use in your bid that when you might not be purchasing that material for a month or 2 or 3 months down the road. Got to have a little bit of cushion on the commodities. I think the thing I harp on the most when I'm teaching my estimating classes where we actually do takeoffs and things like that is making sure you don't leave anything major out of a job. Now, our software has some built-in features that help you not forget things, but it starts with the takeoff. Whether you're doing electronic takeoff or a manual takeoff, you've got to mark everything off the job. That's the only assurance you have that you didn't miss something. There's lots of mistakes we can make in bidding. We can misunderstand something. We can count a couple more fixtures just by accident, or we could miss a couple by accident. Those kind of mistakes tend or we misprice something by a little bit high, a little bit low. Those kind of things will somewhat cancel each other out. If you miss a major thing, a major part of a takeoff, whether it's a feeder or a whole floor of the building, that's going to obviously just totally mess up your bid. So it's really important to have a disciplined process of marking off the drawings as you go through the takeoff process. I see people that do things like count in their head. I see people that don't mark off the drawings. I see it all the time, and I really discourage that because it's just too easy of a way to make a big mistake. Leaving something out is the number one thing you want to guard against. Unit pricing is kind of one of my pet peeves, and I may sound a little bit hypocritical on this because I do believe there's a place for using averages and things like that, but unit pricing in and of itself is a very dangerous way to bid. And I know sometimes you have to do that. Maybe as part of your bid, you've got to give the contractor a unit price for adding additional 2x4 lanes or additional switches or additional receptacles. So you have to provide them a unit price that's just based on some kind of an average number of, an average footage of wiring and that kind of thing. But over the years, I've seen a lot of people that have developed a mentality for unit pricing because it's fast. And I'll tell you a story about a plumbing contractor that I worked with several years ago who had a unit pricing system for bidding their plumbing jobs based on the number of fixtures. And I think he even had a different price for different types of fixtures. But basically, he could go through a job, and it didn't matter whether it was a $100,000 job or a $5 million job. In a very short amount of time, he could count the fixtures, and he had a unit price for every fixture. Didn't matter the size of the building too much, or the amount of underground work, or the amount of site work. It was just an average number that he had developed for pricing by the fixture. And I'm sure he had a little bit of adjustments and things he made to it, but his attitude was, I could do this fast, and I could bid 10 times as many jobs as I could if I had to do a real takeoff where I did all of the measuring and all of the counting of the basic fittings and materials that go with the items I'm taking off the job. And, well, that might sound like a neat approach. The problem with that is what you're going to end up doing is winning all of the bad jobs and losing all the good jobs, because somebody's going to take the time to do a real takeoff, and they're going to come up with an accurate price. So on the jobs where your unit pricing is too high, you're not going to be competitive because he did an accurate job and came up with a realistic number that was lower, and the same thing on the opposite, vice versa side. Unit pricing is just probably averaging out to its ultimate extreme, and it's just not a good way to go. This next one is something that I see all the time too, worrying about the minor details. Now, you might think that's really important, and I understand the importance of paying attention to details. God knows I hear it from my wife all the time. But most estimators that I work with come out of the field. They're not only journeyman electricians, they've probably been foremen or superintendents. They're usually the people that were the brightest and the best in the field, because they knew how to get things done, they knew how to perform in the field, they knew how to get the job done. And a lot of that was because of their attention to detail. So when you take that type of person out of the field and make them into an estimator, sometimes, not unusually, they get too bogged down in the details. The old saying, you can't see the forest for the trees. You get too bogged down in the details, and I have people ask me about, what about, taking into account that this support is the one I want and it's $1 more than some other support. You have to have, as an estimator, a balance between detail and efficiency. And if you pay too much attention to all the little bitty details, then you can really lose sight of the forest for the trees. Now, the good thing about estimating software is it takes care of a lot of that in the background. When you take off an assembly and an estimating system, it pulls in most of the little parts and pieces like wire nuts and screws and grounding pigtails and things like that. So it helps along those lines, but you still have to be careful you don't spend too much time on the minor details and know where the big dollars are. And I'll give you an example again from the estimating classes I do. Sometimes doing branch takeoff, measuring every circuit from outlet to outlet, can be a really tedious process. I don't have a problem with people who want to use an average. I'd rather see you concentrate on the feeders and the big dollar items than worrying about whether you've got 10 feet between outlets or 12 feet between outlets. So you just have to have a balance there.
Brian,
Yes.
I got something related to this particular one, and I also have some other questions that from previous slides, but I can wait on those, I think. Can you give us an example of a unit price? I know you just did, but can you give us an example of a unit price? How would you do maybe a 2x4 or a 20 amp receptacle?
Okay, so a unit price would be something that covers material and labor and your markup. So your unit price on a 2x4 lane would have to include not only the fixture and the lamps and any materials you need to suspend or mount or install that fixture, but the wiring. And that's where probably the biggest problem is with unit pricing, is how much wiring do you include? If you have to get committed to a number like 15 feet or whatever number you're going to use, it can be a little bit restrictive. Now, the bigger problem I see with unit pricing actually is based on my experience with people who do residential work. A lot of people, may come into the trade through the residential side, and they'll get into a habit, or they learn to bid by bidding by the outlet. You know, they'll just come up with a price that maybe somebody else told them was fair, and they'll come up with a price of $50 per receptacle and $40 for a switch and $25 for a fixture opening, and they may not even know what those are based on. There's nothing wrong with using assemblies as long as you know what the materials are based on and you can qualify it accordingly. But if you just come up with numbers that are just general and, you know, unit pricing that you're not even sure what it's based on, that's where the real problem is. That kind of answer that question, Derek?
Yeah, I think you got it as well as you can for that. Did you want to move forward? I have two questions here that are regarding the, let's see, I have one from the bidding and one from the pricing, I believe.
Why don't we move ahead a little bit,
Okay.
and if we have a little time, I'll come back and see if those, because they may also come up in the future topics.
Sure.
So why don't we do our next poll here, Derek, on the do's, things we think you should be doing in the estimating process. Are you ready with the poll?
I am. Give me 1 second here. All right. Regarding material pricing, which has the most impact on your bottom line? So if we're checking to make sure you guys are still there and paying attention with this poll here. So let me reread it. Regarding material pricing, which has the most impact on your bottom line? All of these more than likely have effect on your bottom line, but we'd like you to choose which one you feel has the greatest amount of impact, and I'll be sharing the results here in about 30 seconds or so. Are you peeking at the results there, Brian?
Yeah, I am.
All right. We'll have to not have you peek next time and see if you can make a guess.
I don't actually see the poll, so that's why I pulled it up so I see the answers.
Oh, okay. I forgot about that. All right. So we've got a 60, almost 70% of the attendees answering. We're about 20 seconds for me closing the poll. So I've had some people asking, I forgot to mention this early on, so while we wait for the poll to get answered, yes, we will be making a recording of this webinar available after. More than likely, it will be available tomorrow morning, and we'll send an email with a link to it to you. And I made a note to include that bid evaluator article that we have on our website, so you could check that out easily. And one person asked if we could make the PowerPoint available, and I don't see any reason why not, so I could share that. I'll probably use a PowerPoint sharing tool to share that with you. Okay, so let's close this poll down. 80% of you voted, and let me share it. So this one was a little bit closer. How many comments, Brian?
Should we tell them they see the results now?
Yes, they can see the results.
Okay. Yeah, they were kind of close, and that's the one that I'm interested to see was the highest number of responses, was comparing pricing between multiple suppliers, because that's a feature we've added a significant enhancement to in our software. I think probably most people are responding on doing that process more or less manually. And one of the things I'll show you in a few minutes is a way to do that in the software.
Brian,
electronically.
Maybe I mean, you're going to get to this, but there's some people here that may not be fully aware of what you're referring to when you say our software.
Our estimating program, called the Electrical Bid Manager, is our program for electrical estimating. Obviously, we have versions for residential and commercial. And in the commercial side, we have 3 different levels: a standard, a plus, and a pro version. So,
right.
Yeah, that's. I guess I took that for granted, because that's what the main thing we do here is estimating and also pricing software, and we also have a billing program.
Yeah, I think about 30 or 40% of the attendees are not current customers.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to close this and let you continue on.
Okay.
All right.
So let's talk for a few minutes about ways to improve your pricing, at least be more up-to-date and accurate on it, if you will. Now, one of the responses that got the lowest response was negotiating pricing based on what's in the EPIC program, our pricing system. So let me tell you a little bit about that in case you don't know what EPIC is. EPIC is our pricing system. We have it for electrical and plumbing contractors, and the electrical, it covers about 2 million items. So it's most everything that's out there that you would be able to purchase at a typical wholesale house. And what we provide in EPIC, let me just flip over to a screen real quick. Is a trade price and a target price. I'll tell you about this column here that's in blue in just a minute. The target price is the one that we think that a contractor should be able to buy for. It's an average price based on what people are buying all across the country. Now, the first question that comes up there is it based regionally? Really, it's not. It's based on national averages. And the fact of the matter, and this is a misconception in a lot of people's minds, is that pricing is regionally based. Now, I know for a fact you can get different levels of pricing from one supplier across the street from another. That's a fact of life. But we don't see a lot of regional variance in pricing. So, you know, sometimes people think, well, the pricing in my area is different than it is 2 states away or across the country. For the most part, that's just not true, and we monitor too many suppliers to tell you that that's anything, that's just not the case. We monitor suppliers all over the country. So what you're seeing in the target price is based on an average. Now, you know, sometimes what we don't know is what the spread is on that $16.46 for half-inch EMT. You know, you might see prices as low as $13 or $14 per hundred. You might see them up to $18, $19, $20 per hundred. But that's the average with a little bit of cushion built in. So what I have always suggested you do is check the target price versus what you're getting quoted or what you're getting charged from your suppliers, and use that as a tool to negotiate better pricing from your suppliers. You know, if you're getting charged more than the average price, obviously you want to negotiate a little better price. And a lot of the time it's just simply a matter of being able to tell them that you know that other people are getting better pricing. Then they adjust their pricing. Until you tell them that, it's kind of a useless game. So, and you can look up any price pretty much that you've paid for an item in EPIC. A lot of the time, if you haven't paid the invoice, you can get a credit. Usually the biggest challenge is just letting the supplier know that you want a better price because other people are getting better pricing. Now, there's 2 options in addition to target pricing that we provide: custom pricing, and we're also compatible with net pricer. And I can just take a minute to try to define those. Custom pricing is an option where you go to your local supplier and they provide you with the pricing of everything they carry in their inventory. That is an electronic file that you'll get from them, and they can update it periodically, they can update it daily, they can update it monthly or quarterly. That's up to them. But that's something that you can incorporate into EPIC, and it flows through to your estimating. Now I'm going to show you an example in a minute of how you can actually compare between different suppliers. The other option is an option called Net Pricer, which is entirely internet-based, and what you do with that is you actually request pricing on a particular job from one of your local suppliers that's hooked up with Net Pricer. So that will allow you to do the following option, which is to compare pricing between at least 2 or 3 suppliers on every job. Okay, so I'm going to show you how that works in our Electrical Bid Manager program. So for those of you who aren't familiar with our software, this will maybe a little bit maybe a lot to comprehend, but for those of you who are, this is our job extension screen where you can choose the suppliers that you want to compare. This is a new option here called price comparison. and you can choose up to 3 different suppliers. And those suppliers could be suppliers that you subscribe to on NetPricer, or they could be suppliers that you've gotten custom pricing from on your local suppliers. So what happens here, when I hit price comparison, it says, do you want to refresh the NetPricer prices because they're internet-based? So even if I've checked prices a half hour ago, I can refresh them. So it's going through over the internet now and getting pricing from these suppliers. I've got 3 suppliers in here. And what it's going to do on this next spreadsheet, this is a big wide spreadsheet. I'm not sure how much of it you can see on your end, but there, now we've got pricing. The first column is the Epic target price. The second column is a supplier that we have custom pricing with, and the next 2 are net pricers. So what it's doing here, it's highlighting in green the lowest price on that each individual item. And if I scroll down here to the bottom, you'll see the totals on all the materials. There's the total with the target price, $5,200, the total from ABC, the total from this supplier, and the total from this supplier. So this supplier here is the lowest. So I can either tell the program I want to use the lowest overall, and it'll use his pricing on everything, or I can say cherry pick it, use the lowest individual price, which would be the $4,500 price, and then out of all 4 price columns, it'll pick the lowest price. So you can get really aggressive here. Now, I suppose that's a little bit of a contradiction of what I said earlier about leaving a little bit of cushion, but a lot of people feel like it's very important to know what their best possible cost can be on a bid, and then they can make the decision whether they want to put a little bit of cushion in there or not. But if you know what the lowest available prices are, you can really be aggressive in bidding a job. Okay. We talked a little bit about checking your invoices against the target price. Again, you can check the invoice against the target price or your local wholesaler's prices. One of the things you want to do on bids typically is to look for the large ticket items. Now, in a typical estimating program, this report called job extension is something that will give me my total material on each item. So what most estimators do is they come down here on the price column, the extended price, and they look for the big dollar items. So I've got this is a real small job, but you get the idea here. I would look for the big dollar items. Well, on a big job, this spreadsheet could have, several hundred items. We have a report here that sorts it by the highest dollar cost per item. This report called the item cost report. Again, I've trained hundreds, thousands of people on our software, and they don't know about this report because it's only on that drop-down menu. So when I say sort by price, it brings the highest dollar amount items to the top. So typically you'll see common things like in this job, we've got a lot of MC cable and a lot of number 12 wires, so those are at the top of the list. Just a real easy to spot those large ticket items, and then maybe you want to call or maybe you want to check your pricing on those key items for this bid. Now this next point, refers a little more to strategy than to actual estimating, more to the bidding side of it. When you're marking up a job, what I think you should not only take into account, what your desire to get the job, but you should look at things like the type of the job, the size of the job, before you apply your markup. So one of the things I always tell people is, or ask people, would you rather have $10,000 jobs with a 10% markup, or would you rather have $100,000 job with a 10% markup? And the answer should be I'd rather have the $100,000 job because it's one job, it's one headache versus 10. So typically the larger the job, the more you might be willing to lower your markup a little bit. The number of headaches per dollar tend to decrease to some extent as the jobs get bigger. And I know there's exceptions to that, but typically we're willing to go a little bit lower on our percentage of markup as the job gets larger. The other is the the degree of difficulty of the job. You don't want to do a job that's really difficult for the same markup you've been using on very easy jobs or for jobs you're very familiar with. There's got to be some reward, some compensation for the fact that the job is difficult. Maybe it's going to be hard, or the payments are going to stretch out over a long period of time. Anything that increases the difficulty or the hassle or the those kind of things, you'd really need to add a little more markup to compensate for that. Otherwise, again, you end up in that position of getting all the bad jobs and none of the good jobs.
Brian?
Your long-term bidding strategy really...
Brian?
Yeah, go ahead, Dirk.
Sorry. I have a
Yes.
couple that are pricing related here.
Sure.
Do you know, one person asked, so what version of EBM is the price comparison spreadsheet on?
We released that, I believe, back in April or around April, so it's relatively a new version. So anybody who is current on their support would have received it by now. It has been sent out to everybody that's current on support. So if they didn't get it, they should have. Obviously, they need to contact us. Maybe it went to the wrong person or the wrong address or something like that. But yeah, it's been distributed to all of our current customers.
The customer. Sorry, the customer is on an extended service plan.
So this would be on the last upgrade they got, which was about a month ago.
And those that didn't should call in to figure out what they need to do to get that. On the price comparison, just a different question. Do you have to have your suppliers set that up, or how? And how?
Yes. Yes. So you have to have one of two options, or both options. You have to have either custom pricing, where they send you an electronic file, or you download it from their website periodically. That goes into Epic, and then it goes into EBM from Epic, so you have pricing on whatever that supplier carries. And then, or you have to have NetPricer, which is a service you have to subscribe to. It's a pretty nominal amount per month. I would guess at least 80 to 90% of the suppliers in the country now are offering NetPricer. It's a pretty high percentage. Certainly you'll be able to find a few large ones in almost any area of the country. And that's set up as a service with that particular distributor, and they give you a password and the setup to access it at your whatever you want to have pricing on a job.
Okay. Another person says most suppliers, from their experience, are not cooperative in providing custom pricing.
That's a good point, and that's something you will run into. I think it's really a red flag when you hear that kind of a thing. And I could tell a couple stories about that, but one I remember real clearly was a contractor I was working with here in Southern California. Pretty large shop, I think in the neighborhood of 100 employees, doing most of their wholesale business with one of the major suppliers in the Southern California, Los Angeles area. And actually, I believe they were personal friends too with the owner of the manager of the supply house. Had a hard time just even getting them to provide the information. It literally took several months for them to drag it out of them. And when they did download it into their system, their pricing wasn't really very good. I mean, it was on average above the target price. So you will see some resistance to that just because they figure that the less information you have as a contractor sometimes the better. Well, that's not the kind of supplier you want to be doing business with. You want the kind of supplier who's helping you by giving you not only the best prices, but they're making it easy for you to price the jobs, and they're on your side. They're not trying to hide things and make it more difficult to do this kind of the kind of things you need to do to produce a bid. You shouldn't have to price every item on every job. How many times do you need to get a price on half-inch EMT? That should be something that's built into your system and is electronically updated when it changes. You shouldn't have to be monitoring everything item by item, job by job. Does that kind of address that question, Dirk?
I think so.
So I guess, again, if you need any more details about setting up custom pricing or NetPricer, give us a call, and either one of our support or salespeople can help you on that.
Someone asked if it was a specific supplier I don't know if you want me to say it, but
So this
your story, yeah.
it was a supplier, but I won't tell you the name.
Okay, they named it, so I'll hold it.
Okay.
Where does Home Depot stand on pricing?
That's a good question. Typically Home Depot is pretty competitive on commodities and real common items. Sometimes they're even a little lower than your local suppliers. The issue there, the problem there is, first of all, is that they don't have the same kind of service that an electrical wholesale house would have, where they've got contacts with manufacturers reps and the manufacturers and all that part of the industry. But they have a very limited number of items that they carry too. So even though they might be really competitive on number 12 wire and 12.2 MC cable and 12.2 Romex, they're not going to have nearly the number of items available, and it's a good option for maybe a real small contractor who doesn't have credit with a wholesaler to get started. But the electrical wholesalers, that's what they do.
A question regarding I believe it's regarding the comparison table. Is that included for everyone that has the latest version, or do they need to subscribe to something?
No, they just need to have the latest version of the program, and it's on the Pro, the Plus and the Pro. I don't believe it's on the standard version.
Does it require Epic? I can't remember off the top of my head.
It does require a current Epic subscription, yes.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay, I think that answers that.
Actually, it does require that, because to use NetPricer, you have to have at least some kind of an Epic subscription, and to use custom pricing again, because it comes through Epic, you have to have a current copy of Epic. Now, part of the reason for that is obviously, we're trying to sell a product, but the more important reason for that is we don't want you using something with a hole in it. If you don't have a current price from Epic and the supplier doesn't price that item, you don't want to be using a price on some item that is 3 years old. You could really make a big mistake with that. So it's partly that we want to ensure you've got at least some kind of a relatively accurate number on the things that your supplier doesn't price electronically. And that will be the case for most jobs. There will be at least a few items that aren't covered. Maybe they don't carry exactly that item or exactly that brand of item.
Okay, I can't remember if you showed this. I imagine you did, but the comparison chart, the comparison tool, can you show how you get to that, or within EBM?
Yeah, maybe we ought to do another little short webinar on this. I know we did one when we first introduced this feature, Derek, but let me just flip back there for a quick second.
Yeah, that was a while ago. That was
in EBM under the reports heading. There's an option for price comparison. It's right below all the other options in reports. And then the first screen that comes up there looks pretty much like the job extension screen. The thing that's different is this little part up here where you pick the 3 suppliers that you want to compare to the target price. Okay?
Yes, so that price comparison button, is that there?
Move on to
Sorry, is it there if you don't have Epic current?
Yes, the version, I believe, I guess I'm not sure, Derek.
Okay, no problem. I just want to make sure, because there's customers asking about it, and just that they're aware of why they may not be seeing it. But they can, we can address that later.
I'm glad to hear there's interest in that, though. But yeah, we can work out the details. Why don't you talk just a couple minutes about tracking your bid results? A lot of people don't even do it. We talked about earlier about, one of the red flags is if you can't get the bid results, that's not a good sign. But part of the thing is you need to make an effort as a contractor to follow up on your bids, to get the bid results. And I know sometimes it's, you didn't get the job and you want to move on, and why waste time on the results? Well, those results are important. Like I said earlier, it's important to know if you are close or not. If you're bidding a certain type of job or to a certain type of customer and you're never close, obviously, what's the point? Now, if you can get a little more sophisticated about that and track the results based on the type of job, the size of the job, maybe even who, again, you're bidding it to, and you keep some averages, you can make some better decisions about what jobs to bid and, where you need to be as far as markup and that kind of thing. if you don't have those kind of results, again, you're making very subjective evaluation. Well, we bid to that guy 3 times last year, and we didn't have any luck. Well, maybe we're really close, but if you don't have that information, or maybe you were bidding on jobs that you weren't really familiar with, and now you're bidding on something that you're very comfortable with, and maybe you would have a good chance. So you need to look at the type of job and the size of job and that kind of thing. It may have been a job that was just totally out of your league, or it may have been a job that was too small for you to bother with. So you want to look at all those variables when you're looking at your bid results. The next one seems like an obvious one, tracking the estimated material and labor versus the actual. I can tell you not everybody does that. Maybe more so the smaller shops where it's just not enough time, or it doesn't appear to be enough time to track the actual material costs versus the estimated cost. Sometimes it's just a matter of going back at the end though and seeing how your job turned out. Even a very simple accounting system like QuickBooks will keep track of your actual material and your actual labor if you're putting your material purchasing through there and your payroll hours through there by job. So even if you do nothing more than look at the end of the job and say we estimated 1,000 hours and it took us 1,200 hours, and we estimated $100,000 of material and we spent 90,000, at least you have a good indication of how accurate your estimate was. It doesn't necessarily mean your estimate was good or bad, but over a period of time you should see some pattern and some results that you can take into account as you do your bids in the future. You may be able to go a little lower on material because you typically do a little better than your estimate, or same thing on labor. I've had people all the time come back to me over the years, and in our estimating program, our standard labor column, our middle column is column 2. And I honestly get pretty equal feedback. I get some people who tell me it's a little high, some people tell me it's a little low. At least they're watching it. And I've had people come back and tell me, on certain types of job that they do all the time. This one contractor I remember did a lot of commercial tenant improvements, and he was adamant that he could always beat our labor by 30%. He said on everything else, it was dead on, but because they did so much of that commercial tenant improvement work, they were always beating those numbers. And that's a really good, information to have when you're bidding. That's pretty powerful. Now, when it comes to tracking your jobs, especially the labor, if you can do it by what we call the phase, it will help you. What we mean by phase is grouping the materials separately. So your conduit and fittings, your boxes, your basic rough end is in one group. Your wiring is in a separate group. Some people like to break the wiring into branch wiring and feeder wiring. That's fine. Your devices and your plates should be in one group because that's your trim. Your fixtures should be in a separate group. Now, our estimating software automatically groups everything by phase, and then it also allows you to control it a little further than that. You can break it down by floor or by building or by east wing, west wing, and that kind of thing. But the phase breakdown is automatic. So if you do nothing more than that, you've got a good starting point. So again, you can look at the end of the job and say, well, we budgeted 400 hours for pulling all the wiring, and we came in at 350. We did well. My main advice there on tracking your jobs, especially your labor, is to keep it simple. Almost everybody has a tendency to want too many phases. You want a phase that breaks out to the nth degree of detail, and again, then it gets to the point where the information that you get out of the field is useless. You got to keep it simple so that when they record their time at the end of the day, they can have just a couple of phases, if 1 or 2 phases to put their time to. If they got to start breaking it down into several categories of labor, it just gets to be too complicated, too difficult to really manage and interpret. Just a real quick little example from Electrical Bid Manager here. When you do the job extension, the default, you'll see where my mouse is pointing, is to sort the job by phase. So these are pretty simple basic phases here. I think almost anybody could determine what should go in each phase. And then when they do the reports here, it subtotals each by phase. Here's my 120 hours for my conduit and raceway and fittings. If I go to my job totals, and I go to my labor hours right here, it gives me the total hours for each phase. Now again, the program lets you break out jobs differently. You could even break out the wiring cable for the first and second floor. But this gives you a quick little snapshot of where the hours are on the job. Okay, let's see what we have left here. Another real simple thing that I don't see done as often as maybe it should be is to send a proposal or a scope letter prior to bid day. You know, what good does it do to call your bid in at the last minute if the contractor you're bidding to doesn't have a detailed scope of what you're bidding? You might have a really good price, but if he doesn't know what your exclusions are, doesn't know what you've covered, whether you've got certain things in the bid, I guess, you know, sometimes people take the out. They say, well, I'm bidding at complete plans and specs. Well, you know, that's really a cop-out. You really should prepare a detailed scope letter. And let me see if I can bring one up real quickly in Electrical Bid Manager. Now, this is a pretty detailed one that I got from one of our customers and modified a little bit. But you can have a list of exclusions. You can have a list of other conditions. You've got your bid documents, which would list at the top here. Now, these form letters are built into the system, so you can start with a template like this and then start deleting and adding things that apply to the job. The program will plug in things like the name of the job, the bid date, any information that you put into it. So I don't want to spend a lot of time with the form letters right now, but they're built into the system. And my main advice there is to get that to the people you're bidding to maybe at least a day ahead of time so they know the qualifications of your bid. You can call them with the price at the last minute or, you know, shortly before the bid. But if they've got a detailed scope of your letter, then they've got a chance to ask, hey, did you cover the parking lot whole basis? You know, who's taking care of the trenching? Who's taking care of the temporary power or the temporary lighting, those kind of things. I think it is occasionally not a bad idea to bid low chance jobs. Sometimes you want the visibility, sometimes you want to test the market. I had a customer that we did a bid for just a few weeks ago that I think they actually ended up having close to 10 competitors in the bid, and they turned out third out of 10 or second out of 10, I forget which, but they were, you know, they were in the market, they were in the run. They didn't get the bid, but they were actually pretty satisfied because the contractor they bid to then followed up the following week with another job, a better, bigger job that they were only going to get 3 bids from, and they were one of the 3 that they chose from. So there can be a good rationale for bidding, you know, low chance jobs. You know, look for advantages. You know, one of the people in the webinar mentioned your suppliers. Your suppliers can help you sometimes. Now, they may be able to look at pricing on an alternate fixture package or other brands of switchgear that may be acceptable. A lot of the times your supplier can help you with advantages. It might just be things that your company's good at. Again, like I mentioned the contractor a minute ago that was good and very efficient at tenant improvement work. So look to bid and be competitive on the jobs where you've got the right type of staff for it. You know, because I worked with so many contractors over the years, I see all kinds of companies that have evolved over the years, and you know, they've typically evolved because of the market they're in and the things they do well. So look for those advantages. Look for the kinds of jobs that your company is good at. Don't go out and bid the jobs that are not the kind of thing you do well. It sounds like simple advice, but again, I think because of the tendency to want to bid everything, sometimes we bid jobs that we really just aren't qualified for, and we may miss an opportunity to bid a job that we'd have a good advantage on.
Brian, I have a question.
Sure.
All right. It had to do with the last slide. Can you show us how to access the bid letters quickly? I'm not sure if he means briefly, or?
It's in it's in two places. You can go to job totals under reports. It's under form letters. And you have a list of all these ones that have word symbols are form letters. And you can get to the same place by going to reports on the drop-down menu. And you can go down to form letters. Where are you? Right there. Get you to the same place. Is that you typing away there, Derek?
Oh, sorry. Yes. I'm a heavy-handed typer. I have a couple other. Okay, I'm just gonna thank you on that from Tom. I've used. Let's see. Sorry, I didn't vet this one. I've used a lead source for commercial projects. Do you know how beneficial or not it is to use these companies? Yeah, I don't know how related that was, but.
Yeah, I guess I kind of have a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to that. That's probably mostly negative. Because by definition, if you're using one of the lead sources where they're making projects available to everybody, then that may be the kind of job you really don't want to bid too often. Again, maybe you want to do it to test the waters. Maybe you want to do it to get your foot in the door somewhere, but just to bid against everybody else in your area is not the kind of thing you need practice at typically.
I have something to add to that a little bit. It also might depend on what the lead source is, because I think there might be some more localized services that maybe offer specific types. I've even seen some cities that offer city jobs through their website. And I'm sure he's talking more about the bigger lead providers, but I agree.
Well, even in a city, a city like Los Angeles, even San Diego, there are hundreds of electrical contractors that could bid the job. And if that's out there for everybody to bid, it's probably going to mean your odds are just very, very low.
Yeah, you're right. I think maybe if it's a smaller city and there's some jobs that pop up that maybe you specialize in or do more often, and maybe to keep track of them. But I agree with you.
And again, because we have customers who bid all over the country, I hear stories all the time about certain parts of the country that are real busy, and customers of ours who are bidding jobs in those areas, even though they're not located there. I've got a customer I'm going out to train in a couple of weeks that's not even in the state where they're bidding a lot of their work. So that does happen. Just a minute. I guess if you want to wrap up these last couple topics with some just discussion about shortcuts. The most important time savings tool you can have as an estimator is an estimating program. If you don't have one, it's something you just need to give priority to immediately. Or if you're not up to speed on the one you have right now, you are operating at a handicap, because you've got to be able to put out bids quickly and accurately. There's nothing more important in building your business, even if you don't want to grow your business. Would you rather be bidding a whole lot of jobs to get would you rather be limited to the few jobs you can bid because it takes you a lot of time, or are you better off being able to bid more jobs with the same level of accuracy and if you're more efficient at it? So any estimating program will do things like price material and price labor automatically. Some do it better than others. The new thing in the industry, and again, we've done a separate webinar on this, and we may need to do another one, is on electronic or on-screen takeoff. I have been in this part of the industry, the software side of it, for well over 20 years now, and the biggest change that has happened in the last 20 plus years, even maybe more so than Windows, is the electronic takeoff that's available now with the company we've partnered with is on-screen or on-center software, who has a program called on-screen takeoff. And all of your takeoff is done on the screen. So instead of having to wait to print out the plans if you have a plotter in your office, or if you don't, you have to have them delivered or go pick them up, you download the drawings, and within a minute or less, you're actually got the drawings on your screen. You can evaluate the job. You can start the takeoff immediately. There's no lag time now to starting a bid. I have customers who call me and say, I need a bid on something. Sometimes we can start that day. In the past, that wasn't possible. I do mention here that you may want to consider using an outside estimating service. Some of you who are in the webinar today may be people that do estimating for clients. It's a good option. Some people don't feel comfortable with it because it's a little bit out of their control. They're not as familiar with the job when someone else does it, but it may enable you to bid a job that you wouldn't otherwise be able to bid. Maybe you've got 5 jobs that you think are good opportunities and you only have time to bid 2 or 3. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to consider an outside estimating service to do it. We've got a lot of customers who use our software who are estimating consultants, estimating services. So if that's something you're interested in, then we can help you with that. The bottom line is if you can improve your bid output, you're going to get more jobs. So if you can do that with accuracy, you're ahead of the game. If it takes you, your average average of winning jobs is 20%, and it takes you 5 jobs to get 1, that means if you bid 10, you're going to get 2. So it's a pretty simple math thing, but if you're not willing to invest the time to get proficient on an estimating program, you're not going to have that advantage that your competitors do. So I think I'm going to turn it back to Derek. He's going to mention a couple things that are coming up here, and he's also going to have you, when we sign off, he's going to tell you about a little survey that it'll ask you to do at the end. So I'm going to turn it back to Derek, but I want to just sign off by telling everybody we appreciate you coming to the webinar here today, taking some time out of your day. We always appreciate your feedback on not only the webinars, but the programs. We've been in business now for close to 20 years, and we feel like our programs have grown and are, have grown primarily and improved primarily based on the feedback of our customers. So that's always the most important thing we look at when we come up with new features and things that we add to the programs. It's a neat part about the software business is you can actually make changes to this product, and it keeps changing over time. When you buy a car, you buy a car. The next model 3 years later might be different, but you're pretty much stuck with what you got. With software, it's constantly changing and improving, not only to meet technology, but to meet the needs of the customers. So it's a thing I really enjoy doing, and we appreciate your feedback. So I'm going to turn it back to Derek here.
Yeah, excellent. Brian, don't go anywhere.
I'm here. I'll stay here.
All right. I heard you say sign off. I'm like, uh-oh, you're not going anywhere. I have some questions for you.
Okay.
We'll save the rest of the questions for the end so that those that need to check out can check out and feel as though they stayed for the whole webinar. All right. So what's new? I just wanted to mention that we're going to be in Texas, for those of you in the Texas area, at the Syntex trade show in Wire-Off. It's on May 30th in Austin, Texas. And actually Brian Hoffelder will be there as well. And the 2 days preceding the trade show is offering training sessions, full day. And I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit right now, Brian?
Just real quickly, yeah, we have actually 4 different training courses available. We got a full day of introductory sessions on all of our programs. We've got some advanced classes on Electrical Bid Manager. We have a lab class where we take off a job, and we also have some training on the electronic on-screen takeoff. So lots of options there.
Perfect. All right. And we also have some software discounts available right now. If you call us to learn a little bit more about that, 800-258. Well, you see the number on the screen there. Yeah, I guess go ahead and jump to the next slide, and I'll wrap up the rest of my little spiel. All right, well, just like to thank you, of course, for joining us, and hopefully you found plenty of useful information here. I could tell by the number of questions I received that there was a lot of people wanting to know a little bit more detail on some things, and I've asked them to give us a call because we can't answer in full detail on all the questions because there are so many questions. And I have about 5 more to get to. What else do I have here? Oh, as I said earlier during one of the polls, we will be taking the recording of this and making it available to you. We'll send it to you via email. And as I just said, if there's any questions that we don't get to or you didn't ask via the question module, feel free to call us. We're always happy to answer your questions. And Brian mentioned this. Once we complete all the questions and answers at the end, the Q&A, or you close out of the webinar yourself, you'll have I think it's like 4 pretty simple questions about the webinar. If you could share your opinion, help us improve future webinars. And we do plan on, actually we have one on the schedule already for June to do another webinar like this with a slightly different subject matter. We don't have that locked in yet, but you'll definitely be receiving email regarding that so you can register. We currently have it scheduled for June 13th. So I guess I'll get to the questions now. You ready, Brian?
I'm ready.
All right. Give me 1 second. Can we take difficult installations into account within Electrical Bid Manager for our labor costs? This was asked by Bob.
Yeah, and there's several ways to do it. Now, on the Pro version, this is limited only to the Pro version. Every time you make an entry, doesn't matter what screen you're on, this is the branch circuit screen, there's a field here to factor the labor for each particular entry. So if you want to make an entry for some conduit that's going up in a 30-foot ceiling, you can add a labor factor, maybe 20 or 30%, to adjust that one particular entry. Now, you can also separate the job into sections, so you could have a section where you make entries into just the areas that are difficult, and you could apply a percentage to that. Another option is on the conduit up here. You can go from standard to difficult, and that raises the labor on the conduit only, not the fittings and the wire, but just the conduit by 50%. And the third option, and there's probably a couple more that I'd have to think about, but when you extend the job, the labor column, this one applies to the whole job. I think his question might have been about specific areas of the job, but if you wanted to apply a labor column just to the entire job, you could bump it up 2 to 3 and you'd get more labor on the entire job.
Okay.
There's a couple of options there.
Okay. Where should our labor to material ratio be?
Okay. Good question. I don't know if I've got any kind of a specific answer for that other than, I'll mention what tools, but on the reports at the end of the job totals, we give a material to labor ratio down here. And I don't think it's a matter of where it should be. It's a matter of where you see it typically. And then, if it averages right down, this one's 0.56, so just a little more material than labor. But if you look back over a series of jobs, especially if they're similar jobs, you would expect to see that material to labor ratio be consistent. So I look at it more as a check figure, because if that number jumps up a lot or goes down a lot, I want to know if there's a good reason for that. Now, maybe the job has an owner furnished fixture package, so my material ratio goes down, and then I'm okay with that. So I like to look at it as a number to look at for consistency. The other thing on that material to labor ratio that I think is important is that it also gives us an idea of our risk on the job. Jobs that have a higher labor proportion are more difficult. I think anybody will tell you that 9 times out of 10 when a job doesn't go well, it's the labor part of the estimate that didn't come in on budget. That's almost always typically the place. So if this number is very low, very high, meaning the material is get that backwards again. This number is low, that means the labor is high. So the lower this number, the higher your risk on the job, because that means more labor. Labor is more risky to control. It's harder to control. It's, you can't control the weather. You can't control how well somebody runs the job. You can't control if you've got sometimes even your good electricians on the job. So I always look at labor as the most risky part of a job, and this ratio here gives you some indication of that. Another question, Derek?
Yeah. I guess this is sort of a tip that John, one of our viewers, commented on regarding getting information from your GC regarding your bid results. We request who was bidding and the numbers from each. If they won't provide it, we tell them we won't bid in the future, just for your information. That probably doesn't work for everybody.
But I think that is pretty much what I was saying earlier too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
I totally agree with that.
What is the definition of unit price? What is included in the term unit price?
I think we've been over this a couple times today, but again, what I'm talking about a unit price is a price that includes all material, labor, and markup for installing a defined item like a 2x4 lay-in or a recessed downlight or a single pole switch or a duplex receptacle. It's a total charge to the customer. Total what you're going to price it at. So if somebody says, how much are you going to charge me for an extra 2x4 lay-in, that would be a unit price. You'd have to factor in all your material, all your labor, and your markup.
All right. Excellent. Okay. We had a couple questions about what's included in our estimating software, which I think it's probably best to call in and discuss further. But some questions about data and tell and structured cabling, is that included in it? And when might there be LED lighting added?
I can answer both of those. We have added LED lighting to the estimating database. So that again was on one of the upgrades. I think that was somewhere in the last 6 months. So if they don't see LED lighting in their system, either they didn't get the upgrade or something didn't happen correctly in the upgrade, because we added lamps and fixtures to the database. The structured cabling, the low voltage database is included. It's a module that's included in our Plus and our Pro products. It's a separate module with a lot of the low voltage cabling and patch panels and pretty wide variety of materials there.
Excellent. Okay. And my current employer uses Electrical Bid Manager, and my coworkers are attempting to teach me the program. Do you folks ever give courses on Electrical Bid Manager?
That's my main activity. Yeah, that's other than the product development, I spend a lot of time doing training. We do online training. We have courses like we mentioned next week in Austin, Texas. We typically do classroom training in one location a month. So you might look for a location that's convenient, or if you want to travel to a location, we'll be in Chicago in June, and we'll be in Boston in July. You can check our website for specific dates, but we have classroom training. We have online training where we can tie in on the internet, obviously, and see your computer and train you how to use the software by talking to you on the phone and running you through the software on your computer. And I also do a lot of on-site training. So again, I travel to lots of different places in the country and go to the customer's office and teach them. Now, if you've got a situation where you've got more than one estimator, sometimes that's a good scenario for that, because you might have some people that are beginners and some people that are intermediate or advanced users, and we can do part of the training for the different levels of proficiency with the programs.
We had one viewer ask if you could jump back to the resource page, the dues resource page.
Okay.
He didn't say why, but maybe there was something on it that he wanted to take a glance at.
Let me, if I can get back to that. Oops, here. Sorry.
Now you've done it.
Yep. Page down. Hit the wrong button there. This one?
No, the resources. I think it's the resource or tools.
Oh, got it.
There it is, tools and resources. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He didn't give a reason. Maybe he'll pop back on. Well, I have to share this one. It just popped in from a Daryl. He says, "Longtime user, just a comment that I still believe your software is the best." I'll read those all day.
We appreciate that feedback.
Let's see. Sorry, you were talking about outside estimating services. Scott asks if you could share kind of price expectations and how reliable. What's your opinion on that?
It's going to be all over the, all over the place and that kind of thing, though. A lot of the time, an estimating service will do it based on an hourly rate. I prefer to give a customer a not-to-exceed budget. So it'll be a price that, is going to be the highest, maybe it come in a little bit lower, but basically it's a firm price. If it ends up taking less time and a little less effort, then you might get a slightly lower bill, but I think that's reasonable most of the time. An estimating consulting company should be able to look at a set of drawings and know about how long and how much it should cost to produce the estimate. So I think it's reasonable to ask for that, and then you can decide if that's in your budget and if it's worthwhile or not.
All right, that sounds good. Sorry, we had a couple people ask about estimating residential and whether we'd recommend it for custom residential.
Estimating residential is a kind of a whole different topic. Most people who have been doing a lot of residential bidding usually have, especially if they've been doing it manually, they have some kind of a unit pricing approach where they have, again, so much per outlet based on the type of outlet and that kind of thing. Bidding custom residential, though, is a whole different type of effort, in my opinion. It's much more like bidding commercial work. Sometimes it's a lot more complicated and a lot more involved than commercial work because you can get into some pretty extensive types of systems in high-end custom homes. So you have to do a legitimate takeoff. You need to, price out all of the materials as much as you can. We don't want to be using unit pricing and that kind of thing on a custom home. Residential, we can get away with a little bit. There's a lot of consistency in residential homes. What's the difference between bidding a 1,500 square foot house and a 1,800 square foot house? Well, it's 50% bigger, or 20% bigger, whatever the number is. So you can do a lot just based on the size of the house if you have some track record, some results to go by. Custom homes is entirely different, though.
All right. So I'm getting low on questions here. Let's see. Still have over 100 people hanging on. Let's give me 1 second. Well, the latest question has to do with I believe it's a newer Southwire wire type. Do you have MCAP in your system? If not, when might you consider adding it?
I think somebody just asked me about that literally last week. I have not looked into that. We do have actually an entire department here. We call it our editorial department that actually looks into those kind of things. So they'll go to the manufacturers and see if we can get pricing on some of those products. Now, that isn't always easy to do. Sometimes they're good about giving us pricing. Sometimes they're not. Southwire, in general, I think we get they're pretty cooperative with us and give us pricing on all of their products. So I haven't looked into that yet, but I will mention it to our person that runs our editorial department. But the bottom line is, if we can get pricing on it, we'll at least put it in Epic, and then if it's got a little bit of popularity or a little bit of request for it, we'll put it in Electrical Bid Manager too.
Well, there's a request.
Okay.
I think that's about it. Let's see. I had one other. I have like more of a tech question. Oh, here comes one. Can you point out a difference between markup and margin?
Good question.
To achieve 10% margin, this is what he said. To achieve 10% margin, must use 11.1% markup.
That's right. I'll give you a more exaggerated example. If your gross profit, if you have something that costs $1 and you mark it up 100%, you sell it for $2. 100% markup is 50% gross profit, because your cost is $1, you're selling it for $2. That's a 50% gross profit. It's 100% markup to get a 50% gross profit, and that kind of math works anywhere in the spectrum. But like he said, you have to mark up 11.1% to get a 10% gross profit. Same example, just a little less spread, or a little less obvious.
All right, and going back to the MCAP cable, I'm not sure, given your answer to the previous question, if you would know this, but he asks if you happen to know the labor savings for MCAP until it is added. Maybe that he means to make up.
I don't know. Actually, one of the features we have in Electrical Bid Manager is to do a comparison now between running conduit, like EMT, versus running MC cable. We can do a comparison by just doing what we call an advanced substitution. It'll go through the entire bid and take out your conduit EMT wiring and replace it with MC cable. That's a little bit of an oversimplification of what it does, but that is basically what it does. And I'm not familiar with the AP cable. I'm not even sure what AP stands for. I think I might have been, somebody might have told me that, but I don't. That's the first time I've heard of it. Last couple weeks, last week or two ago, I heard about it. So we'll look into that. The manufacturers sometimes give you an idea of what the labor savings it is. That they probably are a little bit generous on that, but at least it might give us some kind of an indication of what they estimate the labor savings to be.
Okay, and do you know of any labor rate books or software that would cover a vast amount of materials that may not be listed in EBM?
Sure. The two resources I know of are the NECA, National Electrical Contractors Association, publishes a very extensive labor manual. Doesn't have any material pricing, but it has labor on just about anything and everything you could think of. So if there's things that you're trying to bid on and you need just some kind of a number to use, that's a good resource. The other one is Means. Now, Means covers all industries, or most of the trades, from plumbing to drywall to electrical and mechanical, and they've got separate books for each, and they've got labor and material on individual items. It's in a printed format basically, and even though you can get it electronically, it's not an estimating program per se, but they cover a lot of materials. So again, it's a good resource when you come across something that you're not familiar with, or just want a comparison number on. Anything else, Derek?
No, that was all.
Okay.
I got the person. Oh wait. No, I think that's it.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar, and again, we have some follow-up emails that go out to all the attendees, and again, thank you everybody for attending.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.